The red coffin no villager would touch. The second time Lou spoke about a red coffin used to hold something down, he was far more cautious. He had told me many things about the underground world before. Some were strange, some were bleak. Some sounded almost like village legends. But this one was different. He had always refused to speak of it in detail. Later, after I persuaded him for a long time and drank several bottles with him, he finally loosened up. He knew I might write the story down, so he repeatedly warned me that place names, personal names, and specific work units had to be blurred. After I finished writing it, I showed it to him. He personally changed 3 details. I'd never seen him that cautious before. At the time, Lou had not yet gone to work in the county. He was interning in Shudu. In a village outside the city, a man wanted to build a small house in the foundation of his old family home. While digging the foundation, the workers hit a very hard stone. No matter how they dug, it would not move. Later, after they shifted the stone aside, they found an empty space beneath it. The villager set up a ladder and climbed down with a flashlight. The light fell on a burial chamber. Inside that chamber was a red coffin, and on the stone wall beside it were many carvings. The villager knew they had found an ancient tomb. He did not dare touch anything else, and immediately reported it. When the archaeology team arrived, Lou went with them. With just one look at the coffin, they knew it was not the kind of red coffin used for someone who had died peacefully at a great age. There were paper talismans pasted on it. Paper talismans like that were not decoration. They were yellow sheets marked with charms, pasted on doors, on coffins, or in places people did not want opened casually. Those who believed in them said they could block, press down, or temporarily seal things that should not come out. The chamber was arched. Above it stood the old house of that villager's family, a house that had reportedly been there for more than 40 years. In other words, several generations of that family had eaten, slept, and lived their ordinary lives with an ancient tomb directly under their feet, without ever knowing it. The chamber had been built from dark red sandstone. Under expert guidance, workers continued clearing along the outside of the stonework. 2 days later, the full shape of the tomb appeared. It was a husband and wife tomb. Behind the tomb door was a passage about 3 meters long. Beyond that was a space arranged almost like a living room, holding everyday objects and pottery figures. The main burial chamber lay farther in. There were 2 coffins inside, one red and one black. But the strange thing was that a wall had been built through the middle of the chamber, as if the main room had been forcibly divided into 2 smaller rooms. The red coffin was on one side, the black coffin was on the other. I asked Lou, if it was a husband and wife tomb, why separate them? Lou said the red coffin was not normal. The wall was probably built as a form of avoidance. By avoidance, he did not mean an ordinary custom or taboo. He meant a living person's caution toward the dead. To hold something down did not necessarily mean destroying it. In the old view, a red coffin, paper talismans, and a dividing wall could all be used to press an unsettled thing inside and keep it from affecting the living. Based on the clothing and hats of the pottery figures, as well as the carvings on the walls, the experts judged the tomb to be from the southern Song dynasty, more than 800 years old. The wall reliefs were finely carved. One deer in particular was so vivid that it seemed alive. In ancient symbolism, deer often carried the meaning of fortune and prosperity. Judging from the workmanship, the tomb owner was not an ordinary villager. But the scale of the tomb was not large enough for a high official either. More likely, he had been from a wealthy and educated family. Because there was no epitaph, the owner's identity could not be confirmed at first. During the excavation, villagers came every day to watch. They all wanted to see the red coffin with the talismans on it. They wanted to know whether it would make strange noises like in zombie films, or suddenly move in some other way. Lou said ordinary people's curiosity was understandable, but even he, who studied archaeology in university and later worked in archaeology for more than 10 years, had only seen one true red coffin of this kind. After the outer area was cleared, the work reached the most important stage. The coffins had to be taken back to the Archaeology Center. The site was damp, and mud clung to parts of the chamber, which meant the waterproofing had not been good. When they began moving the coffins, everyone noticed they were unusually heavy. The experts believed there was probably liquid sealed inside them as well. That made Lou think of the red coffin at the university in 2008. Back then, he had crawled under the coffin to drill a drainage hole, and several drops of that liquid had splashed onto his face. He had nightmares for half a year because of it. Since he had been through that once, he was especially careful this time. He also warned everyone that whether you looked at it scientifically or through taboo, the liquid inside a coffin was not something you wanted on your body. There was another intern in the group, a young man named Yang. Hearing Lou speak so seriously, Yang was not convinced. He said, "If it really gets on you, just wash it off. What's there to be afraid of? Don't make it sound so mystical." Lou was young then and hot-tempered. He did not want to lose face in front of everyone. So he pointed at the red coffin and said, "If you don't believe in these things, go peel off the talismans on that coffin and see what happens." Yang was provoked as well. He said, "Fine, I'll peel them off," and actually started walking toward the red coffin. In the end, an expert shouted them down. He said arguing in a tomb was pointless. If they had so much strength, they should save it for carrying the coffins. Originally, the experts had wanted to use a crane to lift the coffins out. But the terrain would not allow the crane to enter, so they had to use the oldest method, people carrying them by hand. But the terrain would not allow the crane to enter, so they had to use the oldest method, people carrying them by hand. The person in charge arranged for Lou and Yang to carry the black coffin, not the red one. Only later did Lou learn that this had not been random. The man had been protecting them. In the eyes of those older experts, young people should not casually touch a red coffin like that. But no one expected that the accident would not come from the red coffin. It came from the black one. 8 people carried the black coffin in 4 rows. Lou and Yang were on the left side, in the 2 rear positions. As the coffin was about to leave the chamber, the angle was awkward, and it struck the dividing wall in the middle. There was a loud crash. The wall collapsed. What was stranger was that it did not fall in the direction it had been hit. It fell toward Lou and Yang. Fortunately, the people carrying the right side had experience. They sensed something was wrong and jerked sharply to the right. The ropes pulled, and both the coffin and Lou's side shifted 2 steps to the right. Those 2 steps saved them. The falling stone struck their shoulders, not their heads. Lou thought about it again and again afterward. He said that from the discovery of the chamber to the lifting of the coffin, 3 days had passed. That wall had stood steady the entire time. It had not even shaken. But it collapsed right when they were carrying the coffin out. I said at the time that the wall was only a partition, not a load-bearing wall. After hundreds of years, being hit by a coffin could have made it collapse. It did not sound impossible. Lou looked at me and said, "The problem is that we were standing on the left side, and the wall was also on the left. If we hit it, and it had to fall, it should have fallen left. It should not have fallen right, onto us." The accident threw the site into disorder. Some villagers watching from outside said the tomb owner was angry. Some said one of the coffin carriers was going to become a substitute for the dead. Others said the people inside were their ancestors, and if the ancestors did not want to be moved, outsiders should not be allowed to carry them away. Police from the local station and village officials worked together to keep order. Only then did the situation settle down. The experts first checked the coffin carriers and confirmed that no one was seriously hurt. Then they examined the black coffin and found no damage. Only after that did they let out a breath. But they did not let ordinary people continue carrying the coffins. 2 team leaders went aside and discussed for a long time. Then they made several phone calls. By dusk, everyone except government staff, local police, village officials, and the expert team had been told to leave. Lou was curious and asked one of the leaders whether they were giving up on moving the coffins. The old expert said, "We'll change the people carrying them." When it was nearly dark, a group of young men arrived. They were all strong, serious-looking, and quiet. The old expert brought them into the chamber and spoke to them in a low voice for a while. They only nodded. Then, under his direction, they carried the black coffin out first, then the red coffin. Then, under his direction, they carried the black coffin out first, then the red coffin. They carried both all the way to the road ahead, loaded them onto a large truck, and sent them back to the Archaeology Center. After a crane unloaded them there, the same men helped carry them into a special room. Nothing went wrong during the entire process. When I heard this, I asked Lou whether they were professional corpse carriers from a funeral home. Lou looked at me for a long while. Then he said only 2 words. Armed police. I understood at once. The old expert had not simply brought in stronger laborers. He had brought in men whose presence could steady the whole site. To ordinary people, it meant order. To those older experts, perhaps it meant something more. But precisely because of that, I felt even more uneasy. If this was only ordinary archaeological transport, why was he so practiced at calling in armed police at just the right moment? I asked Lou whether the old experts had encountered similar things before. Lou nodded. I asked where, and what had happened. He said they had only mentioned it once. During the excavation of a certain national-level archaeological site, one archaeology team member had died. They did not give details. They said it was classified. When Lou said the name of that place, I froze. It was one of the most important ancient sites in our province, a major representative of Bronze Age civilization, dating back 3,000 to 5,000 years. It had been called one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. I had only known that after more than 20 years of excavation, more than 10,000 precious artifacts had been unearthed there. I had only known that generations of archaeologists had poured their labor into it. I had never imagined that beyond the public reports, someone might have left their life there. Lou did not explain further. He only drank a cup of liquor in silence. I looked at him, picked up the bottle, filled his cup, and did not ask again. After the 2 coffins were brought back to the Archaeology Center, the experts first performed X-ray scans. They confirmed that both coffins contained a large amount of liquid. This time, unlike the university red coffin years earlier, they did not drill from the bottom first. They decided to open the black coffin directly. After it was opened, the liquid inside reached halfway up the coffin. It was so cloudy that almost nothing could be seen, but there was still the vague shape of a human body lying within it. Once the liquid was drained and tested, it was found to contain a large amount of mercury. Ancient people sometimes used mercury for preservation, and it was also the reason the coffin had been so heavy. Once the fluid had drained away, the archaeology team recovered more than 10 personal burial objects, most of them made of gold or silver, further proving that the tomb owner had been from a wealthy family. The person in the black coffin was male. Most of the silk clothing he had been buried in had already deteriorated. But because of the mercury preservation, his body had not decayed severely. Some of the skin still had elasticity. Later X-rays showed that his internal organs were also relatively well preserved. He looked nothing like a person who had been dead for 700 or 800 years. When it was time for the red coffin, Lou noticed an unfamiliar man at the site. The man was in his 50s, with a long beard and his hair tied in a top knot. The experts had invited him specifically from a well-known mountain nearby. There had originally been 5 paper talismans on the red coffin. Their colors had faded badly, and some were broken at the corners. The master took a stack of fresh yellow talismans from his bag and pasted them one by one onto the coffin's surface. Lou counted them. There were 9 in total, with 4 placed where no old talisman remained. The master explained that, judging from the positions of the 5 old talismans, there should originally have been 9. 4 had simply weathered away. After pasting them, the master formed a hand seal and walked around the red coffin 9 times. Each time he completed a circle, he removed one place where new and old talismans overlapped. After the 9th circle, all the talismans had been taken off the coffin. He burned them together, then turned to the experts and said the coffin could be opened. The red coffin was also filled with liquid. The test results were the same as the black coffins, a large amount of mercury. After it was drained, a female body appeared. She was different from the male tomb owner. There was a scar about 10 centimeters long on her chest, sewn shut with thread. Under X-ray, there were no internal organs in her body. The experts determined that the man had been around 55 years old, which matched an average lifespan for someone of the Song period. He was likely to have died naturally. The woman had been only in her 40s, and her body was very thin. Judging from the chamber, the experts believed that the woman had died first. More than 10 years after her burial, the man died and was buried with her. The question was this: what kind of illness would make people cut open a woman's body after death, remove her organs, and place her into a red coffin covered with talismans? Lou said the experts first suspected some severe infectious disease. In ancient times, medical knowledge was limited. If a dead person's body showed changes people could not explain, it could easily be seen as inauspicious. Perhaps that was why the male tomb owner, even though he deeply loved his wife and insisted on being buried with her, still had a wall built inside the chamber to separate their coffins. I raised a question. If it really had been infectious, there should have been more than one victim. To stop the disease, others who died from it might have been treated in the same way. So why had only this one red coffin for suppression been found in that area after so many years? Lou said that was exactly what the experts later found strange. Even in ancient times, people who died of leprosy or tuberculosis were not treated this way after death. This woman's case was too unusual. To find the cause, the experts performed a further examination of the female body. In her abdominal cavity, they found many small lumps of flesh. Medical specialists were brought in to examine them. In the end, they gave a conclusion that was realistic, but somehow even harder to bear. The woman had died of cancer in her internal organs. Before her death, the cancer had spread widely. Her entire abdominal cavity had been filled with tumors of different sizes, along with a large amount of fluid. When she died, her body was extremely thin, but her belly had been swollen by the fluid and tumors. That explained why ancient people had been afraid. In that period, people had no modern medical knowledge. After the woman's death, those who opened her body must have seen dense, unfamiliar, diseased organs in her abdomen. Perhaps they truly believed it was not an illness, but something inauspicious. They were afraid it would keep causing harm, so they cut out the organs, placed her in a red coffin meant to hold down unclean things, and pressed her down layer after layer with talismans and a dividing wall. When I heard this, I could not help sighing. What evil thing was there? She was only a poor woman tortured by illness until the end. Lou nodded. Then he said, "If you say there was nothing strange, that isn't quite right either. The master they had invited from the mountain stayed at the Archaeology Center for 5 days. Partly it was to prevent anything unexpected from happening. Partly it was to wait until the examination was finished so he could handle what came after. Once the main examinations were complete, the experts struggled with how to deal with the remains. According to normal procedure, the male tomb owner's bones should have been reburied. The female tomb owner, because she had died of disease, was more suitable for cremation. But that would separate them. What moved everyone even more was that the male tomb owner had clearly known his wife's death was strange. He had even built a wall between them in the burial chamber. Yet he had still chosen to be buried with her after his own death. That feeling had crossed more than 800 years, and now, in the modern day, the people present could not bear to tear the couple apart. After repeated discussion, and after reporting to the higher authorities for approval, the expert group decided to cremate both sets of remains together and bury them together afterward. Normally, when a cremation is carried out, the archaeology team does not all go. Only a few staff members are sent to transport the remains and coordinate with the funeral home. Lu and Yang were not on the original list. Before the cremation, the master performed a ritual at the Archaeology Center. Because it was held right there, nearly everyone involved in the excavation came. It was, in a way, their final farewell to the husband and wife, separated by 800 years. After the ritual ended, everyone returned to their own work, except for the people responsible for transporting the remains. After a while, someone came to call Lu and Yang, telling them to go to the funeral home as well. The two of them found it strange, but when they heard it was the old expert's instruction, they did not ask too much. After getting into the vehicle, they saw that the master was there too. He looked at them for a moment and told them that after the cremation, each of them would carry one urn. Lu could not help asking why. Only then did he learn that during the ritual, the master had noticed something wrong with Lu's and Yang's life lamps. Only then did he learn that during the ritual, the master had noticed something wrong with Lu's and Yang's life lamps. The master asked the old expert about the two of them, and learned that they had spoken disrespectfully inside the tomb, and that they had also been caught in the collapse of the dividing wall. He was worried their luck might have been touched, so he asked them to personally see the couple off, as a way of asking for forgiveness. Lu was frightened. He had once suffered half a year of nightmares because of the first red coffin. This time, when he warned people in the tomb, his intention had been caution, not offense. But he also knew that the words he had said in anger, telling Yang to go peel off the talismans, should never have been said. Yang had not believed in any of this at first, but he had been there when the wall collapsed. He had seen the old expert call in armed police to carry the coffin. He had watched the master handle the talismans with his own eyes. Now his face went pale too. The master told them not to be too afraid. Since he had encountered it, he would see it through. But when guiding the dead on, their hearts had to be sincere. By life lamps, the master meant an old village belief: one flame above the head, one over each shoulder. When those flames were steady, the person was steady. When they dimmed, outside things could touch a person more easily. Lu may not have believed such things before, but after the wall collapse, hearing someone say the lamps around him had weakened was not something he could simply laugh off. At the funeral home, they went through the paperwork, the cremation, the placing of ashes into urns, and then the burial at the chosen place. Lu and Yang took part in the entire process. At the end, they burned spirit money for the two tomb owners, placed offerings, and said words of apology. When everything was finished, The group returned to the archaeology center. The master looked at Lu's and Yang's shoulders, then finally seemed to let out a breath. He said, "It's all right now." From then on, Lu made a rule for himself. Whenever he entered a burial chamber again, he would not speak loudly. He would not argue with people. He would never joke about the dead. He said it was not entirely because he was afraid of attracting unclean things. It was because in archaeology, even if the purpose was completely different from tomb robbing, even if everything was done in the name of studying history and protecting relics, one was still disturbing people who had already left. Basic respect for the dead, he said, is a line a person should not cross. Near the end of the story, Lu added one more thing. He said that inside that husband and wife tomb, he saw a real painting of a woman opening a door for the first time. I asked him what that meant. He asked the waiter for paper and a pen, then drew as he explained. In some tombs, the far end of the chamber is shaped like a large doorway. Beside one side of the half-open door stands a woman, as if she is leaning out from inside. Ancient people carved this kind of image in tombs not necessarily to frighten anyone, but more like an imagination of death, as if after a person died, they had not reached an end. Someone was there to lead them, to push open another door. What waits behind that door, no one knows. Maybe another world. Maybe only a small comfort left behind by the living. The story stops there. At the end of the burial chamber, a door half open. Beside the door, a woman standing there.